Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Reborn in Naruto world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 74. Every fucking time. Daiki almost growled, but he smirked instead. He was too late to interfere this time. While the sealing chains wrapped around Fukai and bound his body tightly, Daiki looked up, and rapidly went through hand seals, water-style, water mirror. He spewed forth a gout of water, that solidified into a liquid mirror. And a split second later, a copy of Shin burst out of the mirror, breathing deeply, before unleashing a mirrored copy of the massive 500-meter wide inferno of burning hell. As the two monstrous walls of flame collided, they swelled together into a massive conflagration that lit up the void like sky for miles. The sheer heat began to turn some of the mountainous peaks around them into slag, and the mirror version of Shin disappeared. Daiki made a few hand seals, before spinning out of the way as Kimimaro, skin now a dark brown and a tail jutting from his backside in his cursed seal level 2 form, lunged for his back, arm encased in a massive spiral bone spear. He really could give Kakashi a run for his money and speed, Daiki thought, praising him. Sadly for the Kaguya though, he was far faster than that right now. With a snarl, Kimimaro pivoted and spun, lashing out at him in a rapid barrage of strikes. Daiki weaved and ducked around them as he focused his chakra, and aimed up, and breathed deep, his chest expanding. Wind-style, drilling air bullet. Daiki roared and spat out a massive spiraling bullet of wind as large as a small house, at the same time his tails lunged and wrapped around Fukai and yanked him. The massive bullet of air shot into the air and slammed into the massive conflagration of heat and flame, and dragged it towards Shin, who barely had time for his eyes to widen. All five of them, before the titanic swell of flame erupted in a cataclysmic explosion that obliterated multiple mountains as it washed over it and deafened the world and sent the ground shaking like an erupting volcano. Bent oddly as he was from firing the attack, and with the shaking making it worse, Kimimaro saw his chance, jumping and thrust his arm out, the bone lance on his arm beginning to rapidly spin, heaven-piercing bone spear. Daiki only heard it, because of his eyes, and saw as the massive bone spear, spinning like a drill, shot off from Kimimaro's arm towards him, lancing through the air. It was incredibly fast. But not fast enough. Daiki swung his hand around, a shockwave erupting from his palm that launched him into the air, and he rapidly spun sideways, and delivered a heel kick to the top of Kimimaro's head that would have pulverized anyone else's skull. Thanks to his bloodline though, Kimimaro merely grunted as he was sent flying back. Right into the airborne form of Fukai that slammed into him like a bludgeon, smashing him into the ground, forming a crater under him. And Daiki wasn't done. With all three tails, he lifted Fukai into the air, and with full force bludgeoned him down into Kimimaro, over and over again, each one deepening the crater beneath him. And with a thought, Daiki sent the Kiba blades soaring up high into the air thousands of feet above them out of sight. He only stopped bludgeoning Kimimaro when the sealing jutsu took effect. Fukai could only roar feebly even in his version 2 cloaked state, as he was dragged towards Daiki, and sucked into the seal upon his chest. This won't hold for long, your seal is open, remember, Isabu warned. I can pin this guy for now, but already this guy has more of Gyuki's chakra than when the fight started. From what I can tell, it's approaching the levels of Matatabi. I won't be able to overpower him this easily forever, and then he'll just rip his way out of the seal and your body will be heavily damaged. You just need to hold him until I deal with these guys. Daiki thought back, and jumped back just as a whistling noise appeared right beside him, a massive mott black rapidly spinning shuriken carving into where he stood previously as Shin appeared out of midair. Did you think that would kill me? Shin roared, baring his toothless gums at Daiki, my own jutsu gurk dash. He was cut off by Daiki's fist impacting his jaw before he could finish speaking. Even with his Sharingan he couldn't keep track of Daiki's three-tailed form enhanced with the lightning chakra mode. Did you think I didn't see you teleport away just in time? Daiki countered right back, stomping on his knee and forcing him down, before grabbing by him his bald head, with both hands. Shin screamed as two of the Sharingan atop his head were plucked out, I'll be taking these. Daiki smirked at him, sealing them away within his Dimension Force seal. My eyes! You bastard! Shin screamed as blood gushed from the holes left behind on his head. It was disgusting, seeing into the crevices in his head, and the pulsing nerves in there, but Daiki ignored it, pushing it to the back of his mind, for now. Even though he knew with his own Sharingan active he'd never be able to forget it. Those are not your eyes, Daiki calmly replied as he tilted to the side avoiding an uppercut that could have obliterated a boulder as Shin surged up, jagged metal-clad hand aiming for a kill shot. And stepped right into Daiki's swinging tails as they wrapped around him, one around both of his legs, the other two holding his arms apart and lifted him into the air aloft in front of Daiki. The Uchiha are a clan from Konoha. That means, the Sharingan belongs to Konoha. You are just a filthy inferior piece of trash filth that stole these eyes from superior Konoha stock, he informed, before ripping the other two eyes out of his head, making Shin scream again. Odd though, that each and every single Sharingan he took from this guy was identical, right down to the Manjikyu. And beyond that, he could sense and see multiple more Sharingan-specific chakra sources from his body, over his torso, and arms. 15 extra ones to be exact. Meaning a total of 20 including the half that had been on his head, now 2. What the fuck? Daiki thought. They're mine. Shin roared, thrashing in his tail's grip, and as he did, light purple chakra surged into existence around him, forming an ethereal rib cage, then 2 titanic skeletal arms burst from the side of them, coming together in a massive hammer blow straight down towards Daiki's head. Just before they made contact, 3 gleaming cobalt blue liquid serpentine dragons erupted from his back, biting and slinking into the skeletal arms and stopping them in their tracks a few inches from his head. And a moment later, the hastily formed Susanoo fade away as the chakra was drained it. My Susanoo. Shin went slack, staring at him in disbelief. No, not yours. Daiki smirked at him and ripped the 2 eyes in his eye sockets out. He ignored as Kimimaro tore himself out of the crater and fled away, most likely back to Orochimaru's side so they could regroup. That worked to his benefit too. He ignored Shin screaming as he ripped his cloak away, baring his pale gaunt torso to Daiki, and the over a dozen eyes lining his arms and torso. Disgusting. It reminded him of that eyeball monster he saw as a kid in the Power Rangers in his other life. That didn't stop him, however, from one by one casually plucking the eyes from Shin's body and sealing them away in his Dimension Force seal. I really ought to thank Orochimaru, Daiki thought with a smirk as he lifted his hand, a Rasengan forming before slamming it into Shin's face and obliterating his upper torso. I thought I was going to have to spend another ludicrous amount of chakra to make another pair of Shirsue's eyes to get the eternal Manjikyu, and he just gave me what I needed. He let the headless corpse drop to the ground and turned his attention to Orochimaru himself hundreds of feet away, looking oh so very tense. It was even funny in a way. Orochimaru brought all those guys because he thought Daiki had a precursor Dojutsu to the Rinnegan. And he'd hand-delivered just what Daiki needed to obtain the Rinnegan in a timely manner. Now then, time to wrap this farce up. Daiki cracked his neck, and drew on the seal atop his neck. He felt his strength grow even further as the heavenly star seal spread across his body, black lightning like tattoo markings appearing all over his body. He'd cursed himself for being trapped so easily. If he were in his prime, it would never have happened. I should have accepted Daiki-kun's offer to regain my youth. Hiruzen had thought. It was foolish of him to deny. He didn't know why the boy had offered such a boon, but the boy wouldn't have asked such a thing if he couldn't do it. Biwako would have understood having to wait just a little longer. And because of his blunder, Daiki-kun had been left to fend for himself against Orochimaru and his gathered Cretans. A revived Jinchuriki, a crystal style user, a member of the Kagaya clan, and even some odd no-doubt science experiment of his with multiple Sharingan all over his body. As it was, he could have escaped at any time. He just had to have his summons reverse summon him to Konoha, but there was no chance for him to return then to help Daiki. He should have had more faith though. Despite his horror and worry, Hiruzen could only watch proudly as his chosen successor calmly and ruthlessly decimated Orochimaru and his allies. It wasn't long, before Orochimaru retreated away, hiding behind the barrier he'd enclosed Hiruzen within, staying far away as the world around them thundered and rocked from the sheer aftershocks of Daikikuin doing battle. "Not so confident now, are you, boy?" Hiruzen stood calmly within the barrier now, and taunted the original Orochimaru. "Shut up, old man." Orochimaru hissed at him, yellow-slitted eyes glaring at him venomously. "He has took me off guard, but I can still defeat Daiki," he blustered. He had stopped with koan suffix Hiruzen noted. He could not hide the terror from Hiruzen though. He'd watched the man grow up, once saw him as a son. "So you say, yet you tremble and hide back here as Daikikuin puts an end to your allies," he countered, shaking his head. "Orochimaru, you are still that same sad little boy who feared death like a looming shadow ever since you lost your parents." "You know nothing," Orochimaru exploded. "If I didn't, you wouldn't be so worked up." Hiruzen smirked back. "So my wayward student, are you going to flee from your brother disciple? It's what you're best at," he taunted. "Ever the coward deep down." Orochimaru ground his teeth, before taking a deep shuddering breath. "No, it's not over yet, Sarutobi-sensei, I still have many cards to play," the pale man replied, turning away from him, and they both watched as Daiki captured the one known as Shin and began to ruthlessly rip eyes from his body. "I had wanted to save this for you, but I may have to resort to my trump card already." A second later, the Kagaya boy, his appearance drastically altered from the cursed seal on his neck, landed beside Orochimaru. "Orochimaru-sama, this one is a beast. You must flee, I will hold him back." "You can try, there will be no escaping Daikikuin," Hiruzen thought. Daiki, after all, was much more ruthless than he ever was. Watching as Daiki finished and formed a Rasengan and killed Shin mercilessly, rendering his body into a meaty pulp. When did he learn that? Was it from me showing him? He couldn't help but think. Daikikuin truly was a genius. "Not yet, I still have a plan," Orochimaru shook his head, before grinning. "Besides, I have noticed a weakness. His inexperience shows despite his power, he struggles to keep track with multiple opponents and relies on absorbing chakra or dodging." "Well, what will he do against such an attack where he can't absorb the chakra or flee?" "Oh, you do you?" Daiki's voice echoed over the vast distance between them with a snort, his voice projected with chakra. "Bet, show me this massive weakness of mine, show me my inexperienced snake man. So arrogant Daikikuin, despite now using my own cursed seal." Orochimaru hissed back. "Heavenly Star Seal," Daiki corrected, crossing his arms and smirking, chakra tails waving lazily behind him. "You're a hack, and your seal was trash. I just made it way better, and gave it a better name while I was at it. I mean seriously, cursed seal? What are you, 5? Grow up, you drama queen." Cocky and arrogant, yes, but he had a right to it. So far, Orochimaru and his allies had not managed to draw a single drop of blood from Daikikuin. Granted, the sheer amount of chakra he'd expended so far during this fight was incredible, but even so, Daiki had taken down his revived Jinchuriki and killed 2 of his other allies. "You arrogant brat, then let's see how you deal with this." Orochimaru hissed and bent low, jaw unhinging and opening wide. Hiruzen watched in disgust as dozens of massive snakes emerged from his mouth, before multiplying, then multiplying again. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of massive serpents slithered free from Orochimaru's jaw, rearing up into a tsunami of serpents that rushed towards Daiki, each one opening their mouths and bringing forth gleaming metallic blades, formation of 10,000 snakes. This. Hiruzen's eyes widened, he had never seen this technique before. And all those snakes, they were not chakra formations, they were summons. When did the Snake Clan gain so many? And how did they all have blades within them? They formed a titanic wall over 100 feet high as they rushed towards Daiki. And Daiki raised his arm. Before swinging it down, a colossal wave of force erupted and Hiruzen had to stick to the ground with chakra as the ground quaked beneath him and broke apart. The very ground around them was torn up and a massive cloud of debris shot into the air as the titanic shockwave wet the tsunami of serpents and tore them asunder and continued on towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru's eyes flew wide open in shock, and he quickly bit both of his thumbs before slamming them into the ground, summoning Jutsu, Rashomon. How did he get Hashirama-sama's summons? Hiruzen thought. Another thing that foolish boy stole from the village? The ground split apart and a gigantic red gate 1,000 feet high burst from the ground, a demonic face on the front. The shock wave slammed into it, and the face on the gate groaned as it began to dent inwards. The demon sealed within almost seemed to sigh in relief when the pressure faded after a few moments and it sunk back down into the ground. To reveal an enormous trench 100 feet deep had been torn into the ground from the sheer force of the shock wave. Orochimaru stared at the destruction wrought blankly, before slowly chuckling, "Kukuku, Daiki-kun, truly that shockwave jutsu of yours is incredible. I will greatly enjoy taking it for myself," he said, confident still despite the apparent weakness of Daiki's he'd deduced being overcome so easily. "It seems I truly will have to resort to my trump card," he said, clapping his hands together. "That wasn't my jutsu." Daiki scoffed, closing his eyes. "What?" Orochimaru blinked, so stunned was he didn't immediately follow through with his apparent trump card. "That was just the force generated from me swinging my arm." Daiki smirked, and then opened his eyes, to reveal a four-pointed black shuriken pattern within his eyes, and once more shock filled Hiruzen to his very core, Koto Amatsukami. It was so sudden, so abrupt, so unexpected. There was no chance for evasion or countering. And Orochimaru's eyes glazed over, shoulders slumping like an automaton that had lost all power. "Orochimaru-sama?" Kimimaro panicked, before whipping his head around to glare murderously at Daiki. "What did you do, bastard?" He did not notice his lord shift slightly at his side, pale face shrouded by long dark hair. Nor did he notice as the Sanin's mouth opened ever so slightly. Daiki smirked. "That's for me to know, and you to not?" He taunted, slowly, confidently walking towards them. His simple steps echoing like thunder, even as they produced no sound at all. Kimimaro took a step back, and Daiki's smirk widened. "I can feel your terror and despair, I can hear it as your heart begs rapidly in your chest for you to flee and save your pathetic master," he said. "I can see the sweat forming in your pores, and I can read the very thoughts rushing through your head right now as you panic. Fight or flight, what will it be, Bone Boy?" Kimimaro clenched his hands into tight balled fists so hard blood leaked from between his knuckles. "You'll regret this," the white-haired man snarled and whirled around, reaching for his master. Only for a glowing blue blade to pierce through his heart and find himself looking into the blank, glazed-over eyes of Orochimaru, Kusanagi blade in hand. And the blade piercing his heart. "Orochimaru-sama, why?" Kimimaro gurgled, body going limp and slumping to his knees, as the paralytic poison coated within the blade took effect, pumping directly into his veins from his heart, leaving no chance for any last burst of kamikaze strength. Orochimaru said nothing. That was the wrong choice, a voice said behind him, and it was then Kimimaro realized, Daiki had closed the distance and got behind him without him even realizing, a vice-like grab crunching around his skull as Daiki yanked his head back to look up at him, baring his teeth in a malicious smirk. "Not that there was a right choice, mind you. Because there was no escape for any of you in the first place." Lightning shrieked into existence around the hand clamped atop Kimimaro's head, and lit his body up. The older white-haired teen groaning in agony, unable to resist. And his eyes rolled back up into his head as he died. "Orochimaru-sama." He wept, a tear falling from one eye, before he died. The clone of Orochimaru, helping maintain the four-flame formation barrier around the Sandaime, could only watch in mute horror as Kimimaro fell by the blade of himself, his originator. His mind raced, panicking on what to do. How did you get that jutsu?" he screamed and raged in a panic, arms trembling. "How did you get those eyes?" Daiki ignored him as he swiped the Kusanagi blade from Orochimaru. "I'll be taking this," the boy smirked, giving the blade a few test swings. "Not quite my style, but those are some interesting seals within it." "Heh, I knew it." With a flex of his hand, the blade was gone, sealed away. "Was it Danzo?" The clone of Orochimaru shrieked, and the remainders of his Sound 4, now 3, could only look at him in terror, never seeing him act anywhere close to this, completely lacking in composure. "Danzo?" Hiruzen furrowed his brows, glancing at Daiki. Daiki rolled his eyes, still not looking at the clone. "No, it wasn't Danzo. I obtained this power on my own. Danzo still has his, for now," he replied blandly as he reached for the corpse of Kimimaro at his feet and sealed it away as well. "Now, where did that crystal-style chick get to? I should have her womb harvested, shouldn't I?" he mused aloud, turning away completely. You think you've won just because you caught my main body, the clone raged, before opening his mouth wide. An enormous white-scaled serpent with a humanoid face reminiscent of his own launched from his throat, scales made entirely up of tiny wriggling white serpents. And to his subordinate's horror, let go of the barrier, the clone biting his thumb and spreading blood up his arm. This isn't even close to being over. Summoning Jutsu. A massive plume of smoke erupted from the ground, only to be pierced through a second later as a titanic purple serpent burst forth, the clone of Orochimaru little more than a dot atop its head. Orochimaru, you dare summon me? Manda roared. At the same time, the white serpent rushed towards the closest of his the sound for, the red-haired Tayuya, who stepped back in fear. I'll give you all the sacrifices you could ever want, just kill that brat, the clone cut him off. That was all the massive serpent needed to hear. With a roar, the serpent, over 500 meters long, struck at Daiki from behind. He didn't even look over his shoulder. He didn't need to. He merely raised one hand into the air and clicked his fingers. Before walking away, continuing on. There was a massive crack of thunder as a gargantuan roaring dragon of lightning struck from the heavens. Manda howled in agony, thrashing and roiling as the thunderous beast struck him from above, biting into his neck and bullying him into the ground, lighting up his entire body. The clone of Orochimaru didn't even have time to scream before it was dispelled and Manda dropped to the ground with a monumental crash, limp, body smoking and charcoaled. Orochimaru, you bastard! He snarled, before disappearing in a puff of smoke. At the same time, the white serpent found itself crushed into the ground head first by a massive black staff, held in the hands by his once teacher before ever reaching Tayuya. Did you forget me in your panic of Daiki-kun? How foolish, Orochimaru! Hiruzen scoffed. A chuckle came from the adamantine staff in his hands, two thick ape-like arms forming out of the side and slamming into the neck of the serpent-like form of Orochimaru to help keep it pinned. Orochimaru! So good to see you. I've long wanted to snap your scrawny neck. This is a lot different than how I imagined, but I'll gladly take it. Enma crowed with a laugh. Orochimaru shrieked and howled, but could not escape or overpower Enma. And without hands, could not weave hand signs for Jutsu. No, the serpent shrieked. How, just how? Oh right, I burnt her to ashes, didn't I? Daiki mused aloud. Before turning back to them. The three remaining subordinates of Orochimaru did not dare move, or utter a single peep, stilled in their terror and fear. Let me tell you something about battle you seem to have forgotten. You pasty has been, he said, and pointed straight up into the sky with a single finger. The battle never ends. As one, everyone there followed his eyes, and every single pair of eyes widened as they beheld an enormous thunderstorm roiling in the inky black void-like skies above. The completely silent storm. Didn't you think it was odd how I sent my Kiba blades away? Daiki asked, casually walking over towards them, hands resting in his pockets. Did you forget I can hide my chakra signature? Did you forget how my first Chidori was completely silent when I attacked you back at the arena? He paused beside the real Orochimaru and held his hand up, a blade of silent lightning crackling into existence around his palm. You can't hear me or my jutsu unless I want you to. You cannot sense me or my jutsu unless I want you to. Daiki bared his teeth. I knew about your silly little invasion and duping the Sand after killing the Kazekage and impersonating him over a month ago. Do you know why I didn't bother letting the old man or anyone else know? He cocked his head and nodded at Hiruzen. I do confess I'd like to know actually. Hiruzen raised. It's because there was no need to. Daiki looked back at the down serpent form of Orochimaru. There was no need to ready the forces of Konoha for this invasion, and do you know why? It's because I'm here, and there's no greater security than that. As he said that, his eyes glowed and he projected an image into reality, showing the forests around Konoha. And the hundreds upon hundreds of corpses of sand and sound shinobi piled together. And the hundreds of clones of Daiki himself spread throughout the area, dragging the corpses along and piling them up. Impossible, you crushed the entire invasion yourself, but there was over 100 jonin included in my forces and over 500 chunin. The serpent Orochimaru trembled. You should have brought at least 10,000 jonin if you wanted to beat me. Daiki said, before swinging his lightning-clad hand. And decapitating the original Orochimaru, his head dropping to the ground in a shower of blood. No dash, the serpent screeched, only to be cut off as Daiki appeared before it in a blur, and stomped his foot clad in lightning down atop its head, crushing it in a shower of gore. Hiruzen watched blankly as the serpentine body went limp, slowly lifting his transformed summon off of his once student, before looking at the headless corpse of said true once student, a man whom was once a boy he considered a son. He released a deep, shuddering breath and wiped a tear before it even fully formed. Well then. He looked to Daiki, we have much to talk about. Daiki lifted his bloodied sandal from the serpent's crushed skull and shrugged. We do, he agreed with a nod, that can wait until we get back to Konoha, for now though. He turned his attention to the sound trio. They tensed. You've run the show so far, you decide what to do with them. Hiruzen rolled his eyes. Consider it your first act as Hokage. Daiki blinked, looking back at him. What? You already seized the stage, and you showed beyond a shadow of a doubt, you have what it takes to protect Konoha as Hokage, far better than I, the Sandaime smiled, before holding his hand out, and suddenly a familiar red and white triangular hat was in his hand. You already acted as Hokage, and saw your own authority above my own. As you rightly should, you naturally assumed the position as soon as I declared you as my successor. Now, I pass the role of leader and protector of Konoha to you, Godame Dano. And as he said that, he placed the hat atop Daiki's head, crowning him. Daiki stared. I know I bragged and all about being the Godame, but you know, I thought it'd be a few more years yet. There is no need to wait. Hiruzen shook his head, his smile warm and affectionate as he pulled his hand back, leaving the hat atop Daiki's head. You are still so very young, yes, but you will mature more in time and gain even more experience. But it is more on the diplomatic side of things and management you need, and you will have advisors, including myself, for that to help you ease into the position. But, where it matters, you have already proven yourself worthy. Ha! Alright then, Daiki's hand came up to slowly, reverently trace over the hat atop his head, before looking at the sound trio, and humming thoughtfully, how good are you three at cleaning? I could do with a pair of butlers and a maid. The fuck? Tayuya blurted, staring at him stupidly. I can clean, I'm the best at cleaning. Sakan or Yukon, whatever one it was, however quickly spoke over her, a wide nervous smile on his face, I'll happily be your butler, Hokage-sama. Me too. I'm an expert at handling bugs, I'll keep your place bug-free, Hokage-sama. Kadamaru rushed to join him pathetically. You two are pathetic cunts. Tayuya bit out, but she was trembling all the same in fear as she looked at the younger boy. She was the only one with the guts to speak up though. You saying if we agree to be your chore bitches you ain't gonna kill us? Sure. Daiki shrugged. Daiki-kun. Hiruzen sighed, palming his face. Chapter 75. So that's what you've been up to. Daiki was silent as he let Hiruzen digest what he'd just revealed, sitting opposite the old man in the Hokage's office, fingers idly drumming on the desk. Yet now, their positions were reversed. For it now was he, Daiki, who sat behind the desk. His desk. His eyes flickered to the side, to the wall on the far end of the room where 4 pictures were lining the walls. His predecessors. And soon, his own picture would line those walls too. His thoughts were on something else though. The room was cast in an orange glow as the sun dipped down over the horizon, dropping below the Hokage monument. The Chunin exams had long since come to an end, and they'd returned to the village using the reverse summoning techniques from their respective summoning clans. But, the village was alive with a palpable buzz of excitement and cheer. Celebrations were rampant. There was to be a new Hokage after all, and one whom had proven his godlike strength for all to see. Which was the problem? Fucking Orochimaru. Daiki cursed the pale-faced snake cunt. Dead and gone, but he'd still screwed Daiki over. Because somehow the bastard had brought the fucking cameras with them, and their entire fight in that Shin Freak's little spacetime dimension had been broadcasted to the entire village, including all the foreign dignitaries. No doubt by now, pretty much everyone of importance in the elemental nations had come to hear of his name, his exploits, and his status as the Sanbai Jinchuriki. Which meant Nagato and Obito would know. And all of the Akatsuki. And who knows how Cloud and Stone would react to that knowledge, especially after he'd so readily talked shit about them to Niji. He really needed to watch the shit he said sometimes, not that he regretted what he said, it was the truth after all, but still. They'd be scrambling to amass their strength now for sure. And this could lead to a war start off way quicker than he'd expected. Well, at least Orochimaru is the gift that keeps on giving. Daiki mused, and with a thought, brought up his status screen. Name, Daiki Uriai. Age, 13. Chakra capacity, 417-821/417-821, high tier Kage. Strength, 318/. Endurance, 382/. Durability, 319/. Agility, 328/. Taijutsu, 307/500. Ninjutsu, 463/500. Genjutsu, 202/500. Bokijutsu, 223/500. Chakra control, 407/500. Chakra affinities. Lightning, master the heaven's spark. Water, master the sea parts before you. Wind, master the gale bows. Earth, master the earth shakes. Fire, master the flames of creation, blaze. Fuinjutsu, expert the breath hitches. His chakra capacity had jumped up massively. A full 100,000 increase. An absolutely monstrous amount to jump up suddenly. All thanks to Orochimaru and the shards he left behind in the cursed seals of Sakan, Yukon, Kadamaru and the corpses of Jirobo and Kimimaro. The only one he'd allowed to get the chakra of their Orochimaru shard had been Tayuya. But that wasn't important right now. And that was only a small fraction of what he'd obtained from Orochimaru's stupidity. I'll need to deal with them all though, he thought. He knew Orochimaru had multiple prison-like bases filled with people who had the cursed seal. As long as one of them remained, Orochimaru had a chance of reviving. Not that he was a threat even if he did, but loose ends and all that. So it really is Shirsue's eyes you've obtained, and that seal you created. I do not think even Minato-kun could have pulled that off, Hiruzen mused, shaking his head lightly. Should I say it is ironic? Orochimaru debased himself, becoming more monster than man to pursue eternal life and gaining the Sharingan to learn all jutsu in the world, and you have obtained all he desired, without doing any of the atrocities he committed. And you killed him. It was kind of ironic, huh? Beyond that though. You're taking this really well. Daiki noted. He just told the man what he'd done with Shirsue's corpse, and other techniques, abilities, items, and such he'd got his hands on. Why would I not? Hiruzen shrugged, puffing slowly on his pipe, still clad in his black battle gear. He had not returned to the robes of the Hokage since their return to the village, for he was no longer the Hokage. Not that Daiki would ever wear a robe. The hat he'd definitely always wear though, it was badass. He hadn't taken it off since the old man planted it atop his head. While surprising, it is not like there is a need for you to report all your abilities to the Hokage. And in this case, you keeping it all to yourself was a masterful move that allowed you to ruthlessly and easily deal with a threat the likes of Orochimaru, the old man mused. See, this was why he liked the old man, he was so understanding. He could see others being bent out of shape with him for not reporting every little thing. Not that he'd need to report to anyone anymore, he was the one everyone would report to. And he had all the power, and all the cards. Everything is in the palm of my hand. He realized, and idle thoughts he'd had before, of all the land belonging to Konoha with the Uzumaki gone, the ruins of Whirlpool, the alliance with the Mist, and now having Suna weakened even more and in his debt for not wiping them out in full. It all came full circle. He'd have a talk with Gaara soon for sure, and May. Hiruzen sighed looking up. Danzo though, huh? I'd always wondered why Shirsuke-kun failed. Itachi was not forthcoming with the knowledge. He shook his head sadly. That fool. For a second, there was a spike of suffocating killing intent, before it was smothered with supreme control. You don't need to worry about him, Daiki assured him. Danzo already knows his days are numbered. And to get his affairs in order. His death will be used for the good of the village. Hiruzen's eyes dropped from the ceiling to meet Daiki's, staring at him with an unreadable expression, before shaking his head with another sigh. Yes, you wouldn't leave that to chance, would you? Not with your friendship with Sasuke-kun, he stated with Shirty, and Danzo? Well, I'm sure he was over the moon with you confronting him in such a way, and after today, knowing my old friend, if you so desired and believed it to be for the good of the village, he'd happily slit his own throat. He would, wouldn't he? He did seem the type. Daiki snorted in amusement. For a moment, there was silence between them before Hiruzen spoke again. The question now is, what does Daiki Yurei, Godame Hokage, plan to do now? Delegate. Daiki smiled and responded. Delegate? Hiruzen blinked. Yep, delegate, at least until tomorrow. Daiki extended a finger gun at the old man. There's a bunch of people wanting to see me and you both for sure in this building right now. Your old teammates and advisors, Danzo himself, Kakashi, a bunch of people, the Jonin commander, the Chunin commander, honestly everyone of importance is all waiting. Go send them away until tomorrow. Yes, just let me go tell them to toddle off, will I? Hiruzen, well, Hokage's orders I suppose, even if you haven't officially been coronated, but that's more formality than anything. Can I ask why? I've got an Edo Tensei Jinchuriki gaining more and more power in my seal right now, Daiki shrugged. I mean, I suppose I can go have a talk with everyone and let him build up even more power, and then half the village can get leveled when Blueby gains the full power of the Hachibi and rips himself out of my seal. Hiruzen blinked slowly. Yes, that would be bad I suppose. He puffed on his pipe. Tomorrow then? Tomorrow. Daiki confirmed, standing up and walking around the desk towards the door. At least take some Umbu guards with you, Hiruzen said, not that you'd need them of course, but it's customary. Daiki's nose scrunched in distaste at the thought of him needing a group of bodyguards. I'll take one, he conceded. There was already 2 squads of them guarding his home already, and Sakan, Yukon and Kadamaru who were residing there right now. As proper butlers in training. And as for Taiyuya. He opened the door and stepped out into the winding hallway, finding the red-headed older girl slumped on a black leather comfortable waiting couch, looking bored out of her mind, multiple umbu spread throughout the hallway. Hokage-sama. As one, they cried out and all kneeled. At ease, he waved them off, before looking at Taiyuya who had stiffened. Let's go, you're coming with me. Right. She grimaced and stood up. Where are we going? You'll see in a second, he replied, before looking around the assembled umbu, until his eyes fell on a very specific familiar, purple-haired umbu in a cat mask. Cat, you as well. Since I apparently need a guard as Hokage, he rolled his eyes. Yes, Hokage-sama, the purple-haired umbu snapped to attention, hurrying over. As soon as she got close, he placed his hand on her shoulder, and Taiyuya's. We'll be back later, he told the assembled umbu. Report to the old man for now until I've returned. And then without waiting for a response, Suinpa, he declared, shifting from one dimension until the next, and bringing the other 2 alongside him. Shit, what the hell? Taiyuya exclaimed. Kat said nothing, but looked around in wonder herself. Alright ladies, this is my personal little dimension, a lot like that loser Shin's place he dragged me and the old man to earlier today, Daiki explained. Feel free to look around, though as you can see it's pretty barren. He gestured to the vast expanse of dark rocky land. He'd specifically brought them far away from where his clones had returned to training. There were 3 specific seals on the Kusanagi he wanted to learn quickly. A sharpness enhancement seal that enhanced the cutting power of a blade dozens of times over. A seal he'd simply called unbreakable, because it sealed the physical state of a weapon, making it so without overpowering the seal matrix, it could not break or be damaged. And finally the 3rd seal, that would allow the anything it was applied to extend and stretch up to 2 kilometers at most. Once he mastered those seals, he would add them, alongside the trajectory control seal, the concussive force seal, the barrier seal, the chakra absorption seal, the chakra physical shaping seal, the chakra amplification seal and the chakra blade regeneration seal to the Kiba blades. And then once he got his hands on the creature he had his thoughts on and sealed it within the blades to make them sentient like Samahata, he would have the ultimate weapons. Why'd you bring us here, Hokage-sama? Taiyuya asked with a grimace. The way she was forcing herself to be polite was definitely grating on her, he could see. And, why did you give me all that chakra, but not the others? Well, he may as well deal with that for now. Specifically, she was wondering why he, after dealing with the shard of Orochimaru in her seal, and turning her cursed seal into a heavenly seal. Why he'd infused the chakra of Orochimaru into her, instead of just taking it for himself like he had with the other four. Feel free to talk to me as you usually would, that formality crap is boring. Daiki waved her off. As for why, well, I've had my eyes on you for a while, not that you'd know it. Tayuya blinked. How the fuck, she blurted, why? Like I told Orochimaru, I knew all about his silly little invasion plan. I pilfered the memories of the version of him and the seal he gave me. Daiki lied to her, smirking, meaning, I knew all about you and your buddies as well. And you, out of them all, caught my attention. Initially only because of how hot he thought she was, but when he got a good look at her in person, his interest had definitely been piqued by more than that. After all, out of all the Sound Four, and even including Kimimaro, she had the most chakra. Are you from the Uzumaki clan? Daiki asked her bluntly. Tayuya blinked and reared back. Shit, she cursed, before sighing. Yeah, no hiding it now I suppose. How the hell did you know? Magic. Daiki smirked. Oh fuck off. Tayuya scoffed, before realizing just who she was talking to and slapping a hand over her mouth. Of course Hokage-sama, it was obviously magic. Daiki snorted, I told you don't worry about censoring yourself, didn't I? Talk how you normally would. What was the point of a feisty redhead who wasn't feisty anymore? She gave him a weird look. If I said shit like that to Orochimaru, he'd have gutted me, she pointed out. Orochimaru was a beta male. Daiki countered flawlessly with impeccable logic. Tayuya's jaw dropped at the reply, and Kat, silent until now, snorted out a small laugh. See, Yugo gets it. Daiki jabbed a thumb at her. The purple-haired Umbu tilted her head. You know me, Hokage-sama? She asked, shocked. Yes, I've been learning the names of all my subordinates, he lied as he breathed, but this gave him a good opportunity. How's your boyfriend, by the way, Hayate? I was wondering why he didn't turn up for the third round this morning as the proctor. You even know that? Kat gasped, before shaking her head. I see, as expected of Godame-sama, who even Orochimaru's plans were useless against. Hayate is fine, Hokage-sama. He simply thought he wasn't the best fit for the third round because of his condition, and did not want to embarrass Konoha on live broadcast. Oh, well, that was good news. For everyone. For Yugo herself, and for Baki. And Suna as a whole. They'd lost a lot of shinobi in Kunoichi today because of a freak accident. The locals were naming it Hurricane Daiki. Tragic. At least Suna would get to keep Baki, one of their higher-tier shinobi. Good to know. I was interested in his sword style and wanted to take a look at it. Daiki played it off. You use it as well, don't you? Dance of the Crescent Moon? She perked up. Yes, Hayate taught it to me a few years ago. I love it. It's so fluid and beautiful. I think I fell in love a little bit the first time he ever showed it to me, and she coughed. Well, of course I'm sure Hayate would be very proud to know Hokage-sama is so interested in his techniques. I'll be sure to let him know. I don't get you. Tayuya shook her head, staring at him in disbelief. You fucking slaughtered Orochimaru, and all his top subordinates, completely walked through all his trump cards like they were nothing. You're a freaking monster among monster, but you're chatting it up so casually. That's just not how a guy as strong as you acts. You've never met someone as strong as me, Daiki calmly refuted. The strongest you've met is Orochimaru. That intimidating nonsense, being so terrifying to you all, threatening and all that crap, just shows me how weak he really is. He pointed between the older girl's eyes. He had to play that up, but I'm different, because I'm truly strong, he boasted. Acting as you please is the right of the strong. I don't need to threaten people, or put on a silly cold brutal facade. I don't need to worry about anyone else's opinions on how I act. Because I am the one who decides what is right and what is wrong. Because I'm the goddamn Hokage. I don't even know what to say to that. Tayuya responded blankly. You could try swooning. Daiki helpfully informed with a smirk. That was enough to get a scoffing laugh out of her, as if fucking if, I'm not the type. Perfectly fine with me, Daiki shrugged. The point is, I don't need to put on an act to make myself look stronger or more intimidating. Anyone stupid enough to actually think they can truly insult me, or pick a fight with me, will just die. And I don't need to put on that stupid act and make people treat me like a higher existence than them to puff up my ego. I already am a higher existence, he thought. And your ego doesn't need any more puffing. I think the Jubi looks tiny in comparison to it. Isabu noted drily. Right, still freaking weird, but I like it, Tayuya shrugged, but back on fucking topic, that can't be it right. You gave me that chakra unlike those other 2 or well 3 fucktards because I'm an Uzumaki? She looked him in the eye. I get then why you let me live, but why not kill those idiots? You're definitely not the compassionate or merciful type, Tayuya snorted. Kimimaro can attest to that. The way you killed him off? That was the most brutal thing you could have ever done to him. Why'd you think I did it? Daiki retorted, and I let them live for the same reason as you in that regard. Well, not quite the same, you're far more important than them. But, they have bloodlines too, that will be integrated into Konoha. Sure, they weren't obscenely powerful bloodlines, but Kadamaro had a bloodline that allowed him to sprout 4 extra arms, and Sakan and Yukon's bloodline made it so members of their clan would always have twins, whom could share a body. Nothing at all compared to the Uzumaki vitality, potent chakra, and chances for the mind-eye of the Kagura, the healing chakra, or the adamantine sealing chains. Which brought the question up of what a child of his would be like, that inherited not only a Shinku Sharingan, the power of the Sea Dragon, the Coral Style and his potent chakra, but also the bloodline of the Uzumaki? He was technically part Uchiha now too. But, more like an evolved Uchiha. Because the Shinku Sharingan was far superior to the Sharingan. Sure, there was Karen, but that was only 2 Uzumaki girls in existence. And to be honest, Karen just weirded him out a bit. He'd rather dump her on Naruto or something and have them both bring back a pure Uzumaki clan. Tayuya furrowed her brows, before realization struck. Oh, that's what it's fucking about, huh? She said. Why you decided to make me your maid? You wanna fuck me and put a brat in me, huh? Breathe the Uzumaki back into existence in Konoha. Hey! Cat actually snapped. I'm sure Hokage-sama would never be so low as to. Yep, you're completely right. Daiki cut her off, making Yuko whip her head around to stare at him in shock. He could see her jaw dropped and eyes wide through that mask of hers. I mean, you're incredibly hot, but you only live because of the benefit you can bring to Konoha. Again, I am the Hokage, so obviously, I do whatever I can to enhance the strength of Konoha. Figures, better than being dead, I suppose. Tayuya rolled her eyes. Why the maid shit then? Why not just declare me a concubine or something? 'Cause I need a maid more than a concubine, Daiki replied. Like seriously, I've got this other place. Not my sweet mansion you saw earlier when we came back and dropped your pals off there, but a literal fortress kind of thing. It needs cleaned. I'd rather play fucking concubine, to be honest. Tayuya shot back flatly. Later, he waved that off. Anyway, those doki of yours. Orochimaru didn't give you them, right? Tayuya shrugged. Nah, my mother gave contract to me as a kid before she got killed off alongside my father, she replied. They're one of a few things my grandparents managed to get away with when Whirlpool fell apparently. Yeah, as I thought, Daiki laughed. Only the fucking Uzumaki were crazy enough to tame demons and make them their pet summons. Tayuya actually smirked at that, rather noticeable chest puffing out in pride. We Uzumaki are pretty great, huh? Yugo, who had fallen silent since he cut her defense of him off, spoke up. Hokage-sama, are you sure it's okay to take a concubine, just for the sake of breeding a child? What about what the villagers think? People will talk. And? Daiki shrugged, turning back to her. No offense, Yugo, but people have forgotten since the old man is so kind. That we are a military dictatorship in a constant Cold War, with threats of real war always on the horizon, with all the other villages coveting our wealth and power. Do you Kumo would care about any of that if you had a bloodline and they captured you? She went to respond, but he cut her off. No, they'd tie you down and rape you until they got you pregnant, and then use you as a breeding factory until you died. He told her bluntly, I'm the one who will protect Konoha and its people from the real monsters out there, the beasts like Killer Bee who can use the full might of the Hachibi, or the Raikage who could face down our Yondaime equally. Might makes right in this world, and as Hokage, my word is law. It doesn't matter what anyone says or gripes about me, all that matters is in the end, they'll do what they're told. She didn't have anything to say to that. Besides, it's not like I'm going to rape Tayuya here, or force her to get into bed with me. Daiki gestured at her with a shrug. She can always be artificially inseminated. I'd rather fuck instead of having a turkey baster stuffed up my cunt. Tayuya helpfully informed. I see. Yugo swallowed, looking at Tayuya with an annoyed frown under her mask, before turning to him and kneeling. Apologies Hokage-sama, for questioning you. Don't worry about it Yugo, Daiki waved her off, I'm always open to suggestions and advice from my comrades. I'm not gonna give you into trouble or rake your ass across the coals just because you brought up some worries like that with me. I'll be a dictator, not a tyrant. The real problem was how he'd explain this to Tenten or whoever later, assuming they did start dating. He hadn't even figured out how he was going to explain the engagement to Mei Terumi. Well, enough about that, I came here for a reason. Daiki said, pointing off into the distance, where a large stone dome had been erected, and walking off towards it. The pair of Tayuya and Yugo could only follow along behind him, and what exactly is that for, the redhead asked. I've got a deal with Bluebee and my seal, there's a bunch of seals set up in there by my clones to help me deal with it easier, he replied, giving them a partial bit of the truth. There were seals set up inside there to help him, just not in dealing with Bluebee. You two wait out here, I won't be long. Daiki told them, walking inside the dome once they made it to it, and with a single hand seal, the ground itself rumbled and rose up, forming a door that hid him from them. It was pitch black, but with his eyes, he had no problem seeing as if it were a bright illuminated room. The entirety of the dome's inside was covered in seals. A very familiar seal actually, that he'd used before. Just last night in fact. The bloodline usurpation seal. And sitting in the middle of the dome, atop a small fluffy white towel, was a pair of Sharingan eyes, and an entire skeleton. His clones had done good work in de-skinning Kimimara's corpse, and getting rid of his organs. And as expected, his disease had been ridden amongst his organs, none of it was in his bones. He touched his hand to his chest, and with a flare of chakra, he was shirtless. And made his way over towards the center, where the core of the sealing matrix was inscribed upon the ground. He made a single ram hand seal, and the entire dome lit up as chakra spread throughout the sealing kanji lining the walls like a massive spider web of inky black. Before crouching down, chakra burning existence atop his fingers and slammed it into the middle of the sealing scripture at his feet, Kekiai Sadatsu, Shinka no Aku Thuan, he declared. Bloodline usurpation, malice of evolution. The chains of kanji began glowing a bright timber green, before breaking from the walls, the ceiling and the flood all around him where they were tethered. They peeled converging together around him like a tidal wave of enormous green slithering serpents. And formed a sphere of shining green around him, cocooning him within. Daiki grit his teeth as he felt liquid fire burn through his bones, he almost wailed in pain, before biting down on his lip. He could not allow the sound of his pain being heard. The Hokage could not be seen to cry in pain. He bit into his lip so hard, blood poured down his chin. His legs buckled beneath him and he almost slammed his face to the ground, whatever if not for his palm already being on the ground helping him balance. But the pain wasn't finished there, needle-like sensation stabbing into his eyes made him snarl and close his eyes, even as blood seeped out of his tear ducts. It was longer this time. He couldn't tell how long, he just knew it felt like hours, before the pain receded, and he collapsed to the ground, covered in sweat and smeared by blood. Fuck! Daiki hissed and panted, pushing himself up on his hands and knees. It was a full minute this time, 6 times longer than just obtaining Shursui's Sharingan and the Sea Dragon bloodline, Isabu grunted, evolution begets pain. It's a testament to your seal that it was only this much. Daiki grimaced, but agreed. Because, despite the pain running through his veins, he already felt the increase in strength. Absurdly so. He pushed himself up on jelly legs, clenching and unclenching his fists, and felt the strength to crumble a mountain with his bare hands. Status, he panted, and watched as the familiar red on black screen appeared before his vision once more. Name, Daiki Uriai. Age, 13. Chakra capacity, 465000/465000, Elite Tier Kage. Strength, 368/. Endurance, 422/. Durability, 400/. Agility, 374/. Taijutsu, 307/500. Ninjutsu, 463/500. Genjutsu, 202/500. Bokijutsu, 223/500. Chakra Control, 407/500. Chakra Affinities. Lightning, master the heaven's spark. Water, master the sea parts before you. Wind, master the gale blows. Earth, master the earth shakes. Fire, master the flames of creation, blaze. Fuinjutsu, expert the breath hitches. Holy shit. Daiki actually gasped as he saw the sheer increase in stats reflected back at him. He dismissed the status screen and looked at the wall, and then threw it as he activated his Shinkagen, his vision clear up to 10 miles. Then he activated the Shinka Sharingan, his vision doubling as he beheld all of 20 miles straight ahead as if it were right in front of him. He pushed more chakra into his eyes, activating his Manjikyu. No, not his Manjikyu. His eternal Mangeka Shinko Sharingan, and a gasp tore from his throat as his vision expanded ever more. Doubling, then tripling. On and on it went, until it reached 200 miles. Everything within that range was his to purview as if it were right in front of him. The sheer amount of visual information assaulting him would have completely overloaded him, if not for the mental and analytical enhancement the Shinkagen itself had given, now evolved far beyond what it was as just the mere Shinkagen, and his experience with using so many shadow clones. Even so, he felt a headache begging to come on right away and quickly cut the telescopic vision. That'll take getting used to. Daiki laughed lightly, reaching up to run the blood from his cheeks and chin. But that was incredible. He saw so much. Everything. If that was how much his vision had increased by evolving it to the eternal Manjikyu Shinka Sharingan, then just what would happen when it became the Shinko Rinnegan? Rinne sounds better actually, he thought idly. Already eager to get started on trying out his new abilities. That weird telekinesis-style ability of Shin's was his now, as was his space-time jutsu. Not to mention the dead bone pulse. But that would have to wait. I'll leave it to the clones, I've got other things to deal with right now, he thought, sitting down cross-legged and closing his eyes. Before entering his seal. Chapter 76. The transition from reality to the very depths of his soul was as easy as breathing. He opened his eyes to a vast void of darkness, cast with a faint pleasant timber green glow. The glow of his chakra. Daiki looked down, and beheld the depths of an ocean of green below him. His chakra had grown ridiculously in the last few months. Elite tier Kage, he thought, lips quirking up into a grin. He wondered if that was as high as the ranking on his status screen went, or if there were more above it. After all, even now, by his estimates, the old man still had a good 4 times as much chakra as him. And Jiraiya had nearly 5 times as much. He wasn't able to admire it for long. Snarls and roars in the distance echoed, breaking him from his admiration. Yeah, better deal with that first before admiring my gains, he nodded to himself. Turning, he moved, quickly rushing off into the never-ending distance that was his soul towards where he heard the sounds coming from. It was only a few miles before he found them. The titanic form of Isabu rearing up, all 3 tails wrapped around a glowing red-shrouded 8-tailed figure. One much larger than he last saw Fukai. He'd nearly tripled in size, and his body had morphed, human legs disappearing and humanoid torso shifting into a more bulky bull-like one. The horned skull that had adorned his shoulder was now ever his head, and covered his entire body in a thick bone armor. It reminded him of that corrupted clone of Naruto that came about because of Kabuto and the Ama no Hoko. Which reminds me, I need to get my hands on that too, he thought. He already knew where it was, thankfully. It was just over the outskirts of the border of the Land of Fire, in the Land of Rivers. In Tonica village to be exact. He wasn't sure how much power it contained, but it had enough power in it to boost the 6-tailed clone of Naruto to 8 tails. Usually that would indicate as much chakra as perhaps the 2 tails, but Kurama didn't work on the same chakra logic as the others. So it could be that amount, or far more. It was third on the list for him to get his hands on to increase Isabu's strength, coming after the Stone of Jello Mine and the Dragon Vein. So rambunctious, calm yourself will you? Isabu grunted in annoyance as he slammed the glowing shrouded figure of Fukai down into the oceanic liquid that was his chakra, before bringing both of his massive hands down in a hammer blow, sending his chakra surging outwards in 2 tidal waves in opposite directions, and clamped both hands around the Edo Jinchuriki. Even so, Fukai thrashed under the liquid of his chakra and Isabu's grip, and was actually making headway. Such was his strength increase. I can see what he means about not being able to hold him for long, Daiki thought, sliding up one of the tidal waves and down it. He wasn't as strong as Isabu, not even close yet, but all it took was a few moments of breaking free of Isabu to get out with his seal open like it was. Taking the chance while Isabu had Fukai pinned, Daiki blurred towards them and leaped into the air. He crashed down like a meteor atop the already Fukai, a double mule kick in the core of his stomach forcing him back under the water. Took you long enough. Isabu grunted. Daiki just gave him a cheeky wink as he activated his Dujutsu, the Eternal Manjikyu Shinka Sharingan, swirling into life and locked eyes with the pinned Fukai. Koto Amatsukami, he said, activating the weaker version of the technique. Usually, against a guy like Fukai this would be useless. If one knew they were being hypnotized, the effect was massively weakened. On top of that, a Jinchuriki could be easily broke out of such a thing by their bijou. However, Fukai was currently in a mindless controlled state as an Edo Tensei, and did not have a bijou. Merely a cloned part of one. Slowly, Fukai's struggles began to cease bit by bit, and before long, the revived Jinchuriki went entirely limp. Isabu released a sigh of relief, letting the Jinchuriki go. Fukai just laying there limp on his back, tails fanned out in the water as he floated almost lazily. That was not fun, he huffed. I much prefer leaving all this fighting stuff to you. I prefer a good nap in the water to this nonsense. Oh come on, it would have been a great workout, and it's good to get your body moving every now and then. Daiki laughed. Not everyone is a training freak like you, Daiki. Isabu rolled his eyes, and all I did was spend hours pinning down a wriggling little annoyance. If I wanted exercise I'd go swimming. You always swim though. Daiki rolled his eyes back. And so I don't need exercise then, do I? Isabu smirked back, stretching out his arms, before laying down and propping his chin on the back of them and laying down. Knowing he'd lost, Daiki gave up and turned his attention back to Fukai, looking him over properly. Damn, looking at him, he's grown absurdly in just a few hours, he commented, peering deep into his chakra pathways. They'd expanded noticeably since this morning. Twice over at least. And Fukai didn't exactly have small chakra reserves. He'd been a Jinchuriki since he was a toddler and this morning had a bit more than double the chakra Daiki had currently. Which meant his current chakra reserves were comparable to the old man, if not Jiraiya. The sheer amount of chakra he was forcing out, forcibly expanded his chakra pathways. On anyone else, this would have killed them, but because he's an Edo, the damage was just repaired. Daiki thought aloud. Usually such a thing wouldn't be possible either. It's impossible for an Edo Tensei to grow like a living person, Isabu chipped in himself. But chakra is part spiritual. It was not his physical body that grew, but rather his soul, the spiritual side of his chakra. Which again means he only got half the kind of growth it really would have been otherwise. Not only that, but the sheer chakra increase would have increased his physical abilities as well. Which would then make his cloaked state massively stronger as well. And allow him to expel even more chakra, and loop in a never-ending feedback of ever-growing energy. How absurd. Orochimaru really had outdone himself with that plan, and gave Daiki a lot to think about, a plan to put in motion assuming I ever die, he thought. Granted, with how it was only the spiritual side of the chakra that grew, the chakra control would be shot to hell for any normal techniques. Which explained why he hadn't seen Fukai bust out any jutsu at all beyond bijou techniques and the lariat. Control didn't really matter as much for them. But then, Daiki had a way around that for himself if it ever came to that. Thanks to his young conversion seal. Actually, now there's an idea, he cupped his chin. No. Isabu, sensing his thoughts, instantly denied him. Daiki looked over his shoulder at him in annoyance. Oh come on, it would be a simple way to get a stupid amount of chakra. He protested. You are not killing yourself and reviving yourself as an Edo Tensei. Isabu rolled his single visible eye and lifted one hand to flick him in the face, knocking him to his ass. What is wrong with you? Seriously, Daiki. That's just pure insanity. TCH. Daiki clicked his tongue. No, just no. I mean it, Daiki. Isabu narrowed his eyes seriously at him. I'm open to a lot of your crazy ideas, but this takes the cake. This is taking your life, Daiki, and messing with your soul. Daiki sighed. Fine, he reluctantly agreed to drop the idea. He would still put plans into motion just in case he did die somehow. Then Isabu couldn't say anything about it. As long as you don't go killing yourself, that's agreeable. Isabu sighed, shaking his massive head. Not even death could stop the grind. But that could wait for now. There were other things to work on right now. Speaking of though, no use letting all that chakra go to waste. Daiki thought, slamming his foot down atop Fukai's chest and activating his chakra draining technique, and began draining the Edo's chakra capacity. Before making a few hand seals, chakra flaring to life around his fingers, before he slapped his hand down atop Fukai's shoulder, where the iron armor seal was located. Fuan, he declared, seal spiraling out from where his fingers impacted the man's shoulder in a spider web, before sinking into his seal. He felt the contract seal take effect as he yanked the control of the Edo Tensei for himself, and reached into the seal. He pulled his hand back, swirling red chakra pulsing around his fingers, before flaring his fingers out and thrusting. The chakra pulsed and shot out in a beam of crimson, before forming into a pair of massive bull horns floating idly in the ocean of chakra. Fukai beneath his foot didn't even twitch as the chakra cloak faded from around him, and he returned to his normal dark-skinned appearance. 2 horns, huh? Daiki commented. Orochimaru claimed after years, he'd only managed to form a single horn, but in the span of time since Fukai had been summoned, a second formed. He turned his attention back to Fukai, siphoning his entire reserve of chakra, and when it began to refill, he brought his fingers into a ram seal. Edo Tensei, Kai. Fukai gave a shuddering gasp, body trembling, before his eyes gained color and he looked at Daiki with a blink. Then they narrowed in fury. You dash, he began, but that was all he got, before Daiki's foot smashed into his head and pulverized it. Don't raise your voice to me, Cloud Monkey, he huffed in disgust, watching as the man's body faded away, crumbling apart to reveal the corpse of a random dark-haired man wearing a sound headband. EW. Daiki wrinkled his nose, before bringing his hands into a hand seal, and firing off a blazing hot grand fireball jutsu that seared the corpse from existence. Good riddance. Daiki thought, feeling a lot cleaner now that the disgusting mongrel from Cloud had been evicted from his soul. Perhaps he could have kept him around longer to siphon more chakra, but having a mongrel from Cloud leeching off in his soul disgusted him. Once that was done, Isabu spoke up. It's quite eerie, looking at my brother's horn sitting right in front of me, he commented, macabre even as if some Hashirama-esque hunter destroyed him and took his horns as a trophy. He hadn't even thought of that actually. He turned to look the towering-tailed beast. We don't specifically need you to absorb these if you don't want, Daiki assured him. He could find another use for them, or get rid of them if need be. Isabu was more important to him than a power boost. Especially since the grind always provided, there were other ways. Ones he had planned for actually, this one had just fallen into their lap. Whatever you want. Isabu looked at him for a moment, before smiling fondly. Do you remember who the older one between us is, you silly brat, he snorted, gay? Daiki huffed and rolled his eyes. Yeah, he waved the comment off. It will be fine, it's not such a big issue in the end, Isabu replied. I would however prefer to do it without you here, it won't be a very pretty sight. Well, now that just got him curious. Besides, you need to go mutilate yourself, don't you? Isabu noted. Yes, he did. He wanted to get it over and done with. He'd need to gouge out a chunk of his flesh, right over one of his tenketsu for what he was doing next. Fine, I'll leave you to it then. Daiki replied, and taking the dismissal and desire for privacy as it was, Daiki closed his eyes, and left the seal behind, returning to the real world. He sat there on the ground for a moment. Procrastinating. He needed to do what he planned next regardless. So it was better to just get it done and out of the way. He, however, did not relish or delight at all in what he had to do to get it started. Stop being such a pussy. Daiki huffed to himself in annoyance. It was only pain. Holding his hand out, he summoned a kunai and stared at it for a moment, before tightening his grip around the handle. Then bringing it down and stabbing it straight into the palm of his other hand. Blood seeped out, and he felt an annoying sting pierce through his body, but ignored it as he systematically curved the kunai around, slicing through his skin bit by bit, deeper and deeper. As if the kunai were a can opener. Fuck! Daiki hissed as he finally made it all the way around, before leveraging the kunai under the gouged skin and flicking it. A bloody fleshy chunk of his palm flopped out of his hand and landed on the ground with a meaty thud. He felt the familiar heavy feeling in his stomach that came with blood loss, but ignored it, focusing on his healing factor and forcing it not to act, suppressing it. He held his hand up, looking into the bloody gouge, fleshy sinew pulsing and flexing with each breath he took. Nasty. But needed. He needed to get right down to the tenketsu. Should have used a shadow clone, he thought. It would have been neater, cleaner. But he didn't really need it to be. And he'd probably punch out his clone because knowing him he would make comments. Besides, even this was part of the grind. All for the grind. He sealed the kunai away again, before flaring his chakra once more, and in his palm the crimson red of a Sharingan. I stared back at him. Such was his love of the grind that he was even doing something so disgusting for it. He inserted the eye into the gouge on his palm, noting already that it was a bit too big to work as a socket like that Shingai's or how Danzo did it, but that didn't matter. This was only temporary anyway. No way in hell he was going to be walking around with an eye on his palm. The ladies would not love that. He made a hand seal, glowing green chakra flowing into existence around his palm, and placed it over the gouge in his other hand in the eye. Mystical palm jutsu, he said softly, closing his eyes as he used the healing jutsu to connect the tenketsu within the Sharingan eye to the one in his palm. A shudder went through him as he felt it connect, and the oddest feeling went through him. It felt like he had one of his eyes closed, but couldn't help it. He could see in the corner of both of his vision an inky blackness. Let's do this then. Daiki sighed, dismissing the healing jutsu, and bringing his other hand up into a single hand seal, Izanagi. The Izanagi was an incredible jutsu. A technique that touched upon the creation of all things only those with true mastery of Six Paths Sage Chakra and the Rinnegan could truly use freely. It was a genjutsu that altered reality itself. An illusion that became reality, all for the price of the eye used as a conduit, losing its light and turning blind. The first known user of it used it on pure accident. And used it to revive himself and his entire squad of Uchiha after they were killed in a fight, fully healthy and full of chakra ready to keep fighting. Danzo would later use it in the other timeline as a get-out-of-hell free card, reversing his death. But that was so limited. So lacking in thought and creativity. But then, Danzo only had the records of what it did before and didn't truly understand the technique. Not even old man Sarutobi knew. Only he truly knew the true potency of the technique. The power to alter reality itself. There was so much one could do with that. And there was one thing that no matter his knowledge, and no amount of training would help him attain. Creation of all things itself. But what if he used Izanagi itself to rewrite reality, and perform a technique he knew of, at the highest level of creation of all things? To create one of the most powerful abilities of all time? Black lightning-like markings spread over his body as his heavenly star seal activated, natural energy rushing through his body. And he envisioned what he desired. A small pitch-black sphere. Immediately, he felt an absurd drain upon his chakra. His entire chakra reserve siphoned out of him at once. His eyes widened, and in a panic, as it continued, he pulled deeper on the seal upon his neck. It'll drain me dry, he realized. And Isabu was busy. Greedily the technique siphoned out the entirety of the chakra he'd just taken from Fukai. Then more and more and more. So much chakra was pulled from him Daiki actually fell face flat on the ground, eyes rolling back as pain assaulted his entire body. More and more chakra, ever pulling, ever greedy for chakra. Holy fuck, just how much fucking chakra does it take for one of these? Daiki thought. And just when he thought it would never end, the pull of chakra draining from his seal slowed to a crawl, before stopping entirely, and Daiki felt it, as knowledge flushed through his veins and automatically, on instinct, his hands rose up and clapped together, creation of all things, his mouth moved without his input. The air rippled in front of him, and shifted, parting away like a curtain for a split moment, showing a void of inky darkness that slowly compressed into a sphere and floated harmlessly in the air in front of him. His hands hit the ground limply, and covered in sweat, Daiki lay there in a daze, panting and wheezing. What, holy the fuck, shit. He cursed, numbly rolling onto his back. Status, he huffed out raggedly. The amount of chakra that took was insane. Not only did it pull on his entire chakra capacity, but 5 times the amount he'd taken from Fukai. The air rippled as his status screen appeared above him. Name, Daiki Uriai. Age, 13. Chakra capacity, 1/465000, Elite Tier Kage. Strength, 368/. Endurance, 422/. Durability, 400/. Agility, 374/. Taijutsu, 307/500. Ninjutsu, 463/500. Genjutsu, 202/500. Bokijutsu, 223/500. Chakra Control, 407/500. Chakra Affinities. Lightning, Master the Heaven's Spark. Water, Master the sea parts before you. Wind, Master the gale bows. Earth, Master the earth shakes. Fire, Master the flames of creation, blaze. Yin Yang, Adept the throne of heaven lies empty. Huinjutsu, Expert the breath hitches. Holy fuck. Daiki giggled deliriously. He'd never seen his chakra go so low before. But it had worked. Yes, he tried to pump his fist, but he couldn't move it at all. His eyes roamed, leaving the screen, to stare at the innocuous black sphere floating in the air above him. With a thought, it wiggled mid-air and spun in a circle. He could feel it, as an extension of himself, as if it were another limb he'd always had. Could feel it even more tightly than the Kiba blades themselves. His very own truth-seeking ball. I never realized just how absurd the amount of chakra needed for these things are, he thought blearily. It had taken his entire chakra capacity and 80% of the spare chakra he'd stored for an emergency in his seal. Roughly 5,000 or 6,000 years worth of life force. How utterly absurd. But not without reason, he supposed. The truth-seeking balls were utterly broken. Not only did they negate the existence of anything they touched not imbued with natural energy, they could not even be damaged by anything without natural energy. They could not even be touched without natural energy. The only one immune to such an effect was their creator. How did he know that? Because he now knew everything there was to know about the truth-seeking balls. He knew how they worked, their entire makeup, even how to create more if he should so desire. Not that I can, he thought. Beyond the sheer chakra needed for it, one needed 6 paths chakra to create them. He only was able to form this one, because he'd tricked reality itself into believing he'd used 6 paths chakra. And beyond that, there was something else. He held his hand out and the orb floated down into his palm, before pulsing. The orb shifted and expanded like ink upon reality, forming a massive double helix-shaped blade. And in his hand, he now held the sword of Nunaboko. This sword, made with 10 truth-seeking balls, can obliterate an entire planet in one swing, he understood. Before, he knew that objectively, it had been stated so in the data books and all that. But it had never been shown. He did not know how that would look. Now he did. One could not obliterate a planet. It could, however, turn a mountain range to dust with a single swing. And turn anyone or anything it touched to that same dust unless they had natural energy to counter it. He stared at the sword in his hand for a moment, marveling at it. It was the most powerful technique he had access to. Oh, the Bijudama and perhaps the spiraling fear wheel could match it right now in destructive output. But it would only continue to grow stronger once he finally managed to obtain 6 paths chakra. He wasn't sure what his limit would be, because everyone had a flat limit of how many truth-seeking balls they could make. Perhaps when he took the spiraling fear wheel to the highest level, and combined it with the Bijudama the same way Naruto had combined the Raisin Shuriken with the Bijudama, they would surpass even 10 truth-seeking balls together. But their destructive output wasn't the greatest part of them. It was their sheer ability to negate existence itself. And their ability to mold to the creator's desire, in any shape they desired. He let go of the double helix blade and watched as it returned to sphere form and floated lazily mid-air. A couple minutes had passed, and he'd recovered a decent amount of chakra. His body, however, was still incredibly numb. So he drew upon a little bit more of the stored chakra within his heavenly star seal and forced himself to sit up. Holding his hand up, he called forth the Kiba blades from his Dimension Force seal. They floated lazily in the air in front of him by his will. It was time to bind them to him in totality. He narrowed his eyes and concentrated, and the blades and truth-seeking ball floated towards one another. Then, once they were next to each other, the black sphere pulsed and spread like a wave, spreading over the two blades and swallowing them whole. Before shrinking back down into a simple black sphere. Daiki smirked. "Come," he said simply, looking at the sphere. It vibrated in spot for a moment, pitch-black lightning crackling around it, before it split apart and formed into two very familiar fanged blades. Only now, they were pitch-black. And contained and enhanced the power of every single element, not just that of lightning. This is the chrysalis that will give birth to the ultimate weapons. Daiki thought with a laugh, falling back on his back and kicking his legs out joyfully like a child. Once he had applied all the seals he'd gotten his hands on his trip to Mist, and from the Kusanagi, and gotten his hands on the creature he wanted to use, the ultimate weapons would be born. That wraps up this part of What If Reborn in Naruto World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.